The Dragonback series by Timothy Zahn. Book 5. Dragon and Judge. Chapter 2. Jack couldn't remember ever having walked the soil of Semaline, but the soil itself, or at least the aromatic variety around the north central spaceport, had most certainly found its way into the ship during their brief visits. Now, as he walked down the SNA's ramp, the half-remembered smells floated across his face like a softly smothering blanket. For a moment, his feet seemed to tangle against each other, as if unwilling to move him deeper into the aroma.
"Are you all right?"
Dracos asked quietly from his right shoulder. I'm fine, Jack assured him, working on getting his stride going again. There's a smell here that really gets to me. The Kadah's head, flattened onto its two-dimensional form across Jack's shoulder, rose slightly against his shirt, his tongue flicking out briefly as he tasted the air.
"I don't detect anything dangerous,"
he said. I didn't say it was dangerous, Jack countered tartly. I just said it got to me. Dracos didn't answer, and Jack grimaced. That had been rude. Sorry, he apologized. I guess I'm a little on edge.
"Maybe you should reconsider letting Allison go with you. Uncle
Draco suggested. Uncle Verge seconded the idea from the comm clip on his left collar. I could be there in 2 minutes, Allison's voice seconded. Jack squared his shoulders. Whatever was on this world, he could handle it. He and Dracos, not he and Allison Cana. Thanks, but I can do this, he said. You just take care of Taneem. Help her with her English lessons if you get bored. Jack, lad, Uncle Verge began. And you just take care of them, okay? Jack cut him off. I can do this. Uncle Verge sighed. Whatever you say, lad. The spaceport was laid out in a series of concentric rings, with the ground and air transport pickup point in the center.
Odd design,
Dracos commented as the trickles of passengers and crews from the docking slots on the outer edges began to form themselves into a more densely packed inward-moving crowd.
Why would anyone deliberately build a spaceport that actually creates congestion?
You got me, buddy symbiont, Jack said, dodging out of the way as a couple of comm friends pushed past him. Maybe they don't want big crowds coming through here. It's only a small regional spaceport, on an out-of-the-way world.
Not a very wealthy one either,
Dracos commented. No, but it could have been, Jack said as he ducked past a group of chattering gantries through the doorway and into the next ring inward. There are supposed to be some really nice lithium and iridium deposits in the Golden territories east of here.
Why weren't they developed?
Jack shrugged. Uncle Virgil told me that some mining corporation had managed to get the whole area tangled up in red tape and paperwork. Something brushed his back, pulling at the light jacket he'd put on to help conceal the tangler belt at his waist. Jack twitched himself free and kept moving. The brush came again, more insistent this time. Again, Jack pulled away, then turned to see what the problem was. He found himself gazing half a head down at a Golven. The alien's long face was gazing up at him, his thin, wiry body visibly trembling. He wore nothing but a knee-length, tan-colored vest covered with bulging pockets. Is there a problem? Jack asked.
It is he,
the Golven said, his voice sounding like sandpaper rubbing across slate.
It is the Jupa. The Jupas are gone,
another Golven voice objected from behind Jack. Jack turned to find that 2 more of the wiry creatures had come up behind him. They joined the first in pawing at his jacket, their white noses snuffling like bloodhounds on a fresh scent.
Then perhaps this is a third Jupa they have sent to us,
the first Golven said firmly.
He smells much as they did. But the Jupas are gone.
The second Golvan repeated.
But there is so much that needs to be done,
the first countered.
He smells like the Jupa Stewart and the Jupa Ariel. He must therefore be a Jupa.
Or I'm just a human, Jack interjected, wondering what in space a Jupa was. Maybe what you're smelling is just normal human scent.
I have smelled other humans,
the first Golvan insisted.
You are a Jupa. The one will know the truth,
the third Golvan spoke up.
We should take him to the one. Yes, indeed,
the first Golvan said, brightening.
You must come with us, Jupa.
Wait a minute, Jack protested, trying to pull away. But their hands had some sort of odd stickiness to them, and the more he pulled, the more he seemed permanently attached. I can't go with you. I have to get to the bank.
You are the Jupa,
the first Golvan said firmly.
We have awaited your arrival for a long time.
I have to go to the bank, Jack insisted, twisting his arms free of his jacket. But the three sets of sticky hands merely transferred themselves to his shirt and jeans. Look, you're confusing me with someone else. I'm not who you think I am. Really?
Jack!
Dracos murmured urgently from his shoulder. No, stay down, Jack warned quietly, eyeing the crowd around them. The last thing he and Dracos needed right now was for the Kadaw's existence to burst into public knowledge. He and Allison needed a certain freedom of movement if they were going to stop Neverland and the Balaga. The Golvans were moving Jack along now, herding him like a prize sheep as they headed for one of the exits into the inner transportation area. Maybe out in the open, Jack thought, he would have a better chance of escaping. He was still waiting for that chance when the Golvans ushered him into the back seat of a cramped, beat-up old air shuttle and piled in around him. The driver produced a starter from one of his vest pockets, and 10 seconds later they were in the air and heading east. It was only then that Jack noticed that both his comm clip and his tangler were missing. Where was he when you lost him? Allison asked, checking the clip on her compact Corvine 4mm pistol as she raced toward the airlock. Third ring toward the middle, Uncle Verge said, his voice as agitated as Allison had ever heard it. Hey, we're talking to someone. At least 2 people, maybe more. Yeah. And then the transmission cut off, huh? So whatever they were, they'd made sure to shut off Jack's comm clip when they grabbed him. That was a bad sign. He's got the spare in his shoe, right?
Yeah, if he can get to it,
Uncle Verge said grimly.
There's a comm clip for you on the shelf in the airlock.
I've got my own, Allison reminded him.
This one's already tuned to my frequency and pattern specs.
Fine, Allison growled. Whatever. Tanim was waiting in the airlock, her gray scales shimmering in the light as she paced restlessly around the room.
There is danger,
she asked anxiously as Allison picked up the comm clip Uncle Verge had mentioned and fastened it to her collar. Don't know yet, Allison said, trying to put the best possible light on the situation. Despite her adult Kada body, Tanim was still not much more than a child intellectually, and scaring her wouldn't do either of them any good. Come on, get aboard. She held out her hand. Tanim lifted a paw and set it on her wrist, and a second later had gone two-dimensional and slithered up Allison's arm onto her back. Allison hunched her shoulders, her skin tingling as the Kada slid across her back to the wraparound position she'd found to be the most comfortable for her. Even after 2 weeks of doing this a couple of times a day, she still wasn't used to it. Uncle Verge? She called, tapping the comm clip.
Signal's clear,
the computer personality confirmed tightly.
Watch yourself.
I will, Allison promised as the hatch popped open and the gangway ramp slid down to the stained concrete of the landing pad. From the air, the spaceport had looked rather poorly designed. Now, as Allison fought her way through the crowd streaming toward the central bottleneck, she realized just how badly designed it really was. She kept her eyes open as she walked and was shoved in turn. But if Jack was still here, she wasn't spotting him. Still nothing from his comm clip? She asked Uncle Verge.
No,
The answer came, just audible over the background noise.
But you're in about the same place he was when the transmission cut off.
Allison worked her way to the nearest wall, pausing there to crane her neck over the crowd. No Jack, but also no one who looked like they might be a Malison Ring mercenary, unless they just grab Jack and run. No. For some reason, they still seemed to want Virgil Morgan. They wouldn't just run off with Jack without at least hanging around long enough to leave a ransom demand. It sounded to me like there was something there at the end about going to the bank, she said.
Jack said he needed to go to the bank,
Uncle Verge corrected.
No one said they were actually going there.
Maybe not, but it's as good a place to start as any, Allison said. Rejoining the crowd, she continued onward. She reached the center to find an entire half-circle dedicated to the ground and air taxis. Working her way to the first vehicle in line, she got in.
Two?
A long-faced Golden asked, his flat nose snuffling at the air between them like a piece of paper flapping in a stiff breeze. Bank of La Felle, she told him. His nose snuffled another moment, and then he turned back to the wheel and pulled out into the drive. Allison leaned back, trying to look all directions. 10 minutes later, the driver pulled up in front of the bank. Jack, unfortunately, was nowhere in sight.
Now what,
Uncle Verge asked as Allison climbed the steep steps toward the front door. I'm going in, she told him. They could easily have gotten here ahead of me. If not, she shrugged, I might as well at least clear out the box.
With Jack holding the only key?
Uncle Verge retorted.
That'll be a neat trick, yeah.
Not really, Allison said, smiling despite the seriousness of the situation. If only he knew. It's box 433, right?
Right,
Uncle Verge said suspiciously.
What are you?
I'm shutting down, Allison said. Stay cool, okay?
Allison!
She tapped the comm clip, cutting off his protest, and went inside. The bank interior was small and modestly decorated, as befit a small operation on a world most of the Orion Armed society and culture had long since left behind. 2 comm friends were working the counter, and a bulky Trin Trang was seated at a desk by the doorway leading into the back room.
May we assist?
One of the comm friends asked. I need to get into box 433, Allison said, walking toward the Tri-Tang at the desk. The name of record is Virgil Morgan. The Tri-Tang typed for a moment on his keyboard, then peered at his display. Yes, he confirmed, opening a drawer and pulling out a shiny gold metal electronic key. You have the key? Of course, Allison said, digging her right hand into her pocket for her collection of small keys. Picking by touch the one she knew looked the most like the Tri-Tangs, she pulled it out and held it up. Right here, she said, keeping her hand moving so that he couldn't quite get a clear look at the key. I'm in rather a hurry, she added, lowering her hand to her side. The Tri-Tang's shoulders hunched in the equivalent of a frown, but without a word, he stood up and gestured toward the doorway. Come. He led the way into the back room and the vault beyond it. Keeping her left hand out of his view, Allison squeezed her thumb against the base of her left forefinger, and the plastic lockpick, surgically implanted beneath the fingernail, silently slid out into ready position. Recessed into the side of the vault were 3 rows of private lockboxes. 433, the Tri-Tang said, pointing a thick finger at one of them as he went to the far end of the row and inserted his key into the master lock at the end. Your convenience. Allison stepped to the indicated box, turning a little to put her shoulder between the Tri-Tang and the lockbox. Using both hands as if she were having trouble inserting the key, she slid the lockpick into the keyhole. The semi-fluid plastic did its magic, flowing up against the mark pins and triggering the proper transponder connections. And with a twist of her wrist, the lock came open. Sliding the lockpick back into concealment, she pulled the drawer open. The only thing inside was a small shoulder bag, flattened and compressed to fit into the narrow space. She picked it up, noting that it seemed surprisingly light, and looped the strap over her shoulder. Thank you, she told the Tri-Tang as she returned the empty box to its place. You are welcome, the Trin Trang said, turning his key in the master lock again.
We live to serve.
Allison headed for the door, the bag bouncing gently against her side. So much, she thought sourly, for the lockbox being full of cash, the way Jack had implied. A minute later, she was back outside, heading briskly down the steps and wondering what to try next. Obviously, Jack hadn't gotten to the bank ahead of her. Should she wait around and see if he might still turn up? Or should she assume that he and Dracos would get free and call Uncle Verge on their spare comm clip? Maybe Uncle Verge would have an idea. She reached for her collar to turn her comm clip back on.
I don't think so,
a deep voice murmured in her ear as a large hand curled solidly around her wrist.
Just keep walking.
Allison twisted her head around. The man holding her arm was large and muscular, with short hair, a bushy mustache, and the bent nose of a man who'd been in more than his fair share of fights. What do you think you're doing? She demanded.
So Virgil Morgan finally sent someone to open his lockbox, the man said. You'd better hope he's willing to come out and play.
He smiled a grim smile.
Because if he's not,
he added,
you're dead.